My coworker thinks I should cover her shifts just because I don't have kids, but when I said no, she turned the whole team against me. I, 28F, work full-time in retail, and as anyone who's worked retail knows, it can be pretty exhausting. I've got a busy life outside of work, trying to balance my hobbies, taking care of my apartment, seeing friends, and just taking care of myself. You know, normal adult stuff. I don't have kids, but that doesn't mean I'm lounging around with endless free time. One of my coworkers, Sarah, 32F, has 2 young kids. She's always asking people to cover her shifts, which I understand because being a mom is hard and things come up. Over the past year, I've covered for her quite a few times when she had to leave early or couldn't make it in because of some kid emergency. I did it out of kindness because I get that life can be unpredictable, and I wanted to help her out. But I've started to notice that I'm one of the only ones she asks to help cover her shifts. It's like she expects me to do it just because I don't have the same responsibilities as her. Last week, she asked me again to cover for her because her kid had a school event. Normally, I'd try to help, but I already had plans to spend the day with my sister, who I hadn't seen in a while. I told Sarah I couldn't this time, and she just sighed and said, "Must be nice to have all that free time. You don't have kids, so it's not like you're busy with anything important." I was pretty taken aback, I told her. Just because I don't have kids doesn't mean I don't have a life. My time is important too. She kind of rolled her eyes and walked away, but I could tell she wasn't happy with me. Now she's been telling our other coworkers that I'm selfish and don't understand how hard it is to be a mom. A couple of them have started acting a bit distant toward me, and I overheard one of them saying something like, "She has it easy. No wonder she doesn't get it." I didn't realize not having kids made me less deserving of respect at work. What really gets me is that I've always tried to help when I could. But just because I don't have kids doesn't mean my life is suddenly stress-free, or that I can drop everything at a moment's notice. I feel like Sarah doesn't respect my time at all, and that really bothers me. I ended up mentioning it to my manager, hoping for a little understanding, but they just said it's a personal conflict and didn't want to get involved. So now I'm stuck feeling like the bad guy because I said no for once. I honestly don't think it's fair to expect me to cover her shifts all the time just because I don't have children. I have responsibilities too, and I deserve to have a life outside of work. But some of my coworkers seem to think I should be helping out more because Sarah's a mom and I'm not. Am I being selfish here? Aida for finally standing my ground and refusing to cover her shifts after she basically called me lazy? Update 1. I wasn't really expecting my original post to blow up like it did, but wow. I appreciate all the comments and feedback. I've had some time to reflect on everything that's happened since then, and, well, things got interesting at work. After posting, I tried to keep my head down for a bit, just focusing on my shifts and not letting the negativity get to me. But it was hard, you know? Sarah wasn't letting this go, and the whispers from some coworkers were starting to get under my skin. I mean, I get that being a mom is tough, but does that mean I have to accept being treated like a doormat? I was beginning to dread going to work, which is something I had never experienced before. So one day during our break, a new coworker, Jenna, 26F, who had just started a few weeks prior, approached me. I didn't know her well, but she seemed genuinely interested in my situation. She said she had overheard some of the comments Sarah and a few others were making. Jenna shared that she was also a single woman, working hard to make ends meet, and she understood where I was coming from. It was refreshing to hear someone validate my feelings, especially since it seemed like everyone else was siding with Sarah. Jenna and I started chatting more during our breaks, and she shared that she had a similar situation at her previous job, where a coworker expected everyone to cover her shifts just because she had kids. We bonded over the shared frustration, and it felt good to know I wasn't alone in this. During one of those chats, Jenna mentioned that she had a few friends who worked in HR, and she suggested I consider speaking to someone in HR about the situation with Sarah. I had been hesitant to escalate things further, but the idea of discussing it with someone who might understand both sides made sense. And after giving it some thought, I decided to reach out to HR, hoping they could help mediate the situation. I made an appointment, and when the day arrived, I was a bundle of nerves, but I went in with my head held high. I explained everything that had happened, how I felt disrespected and overwhelmed by the expectations being placed on me, and I emphasized that my time was valuable too. To my surprise, the HR representative was incredibly sympathetic. She listened intently and asked thoughtful questions, wanting to understand the dynamics at play. After our discussion, she mentioned she would talk to my manager and Sarah to ensure we could all find a way to work together respectfully. That was a relief, but also a bit intimidating, knowing that Sarah would be in the loop. I wasn't sure how she would react, but I was hopeful for some kind of resolution. The next day, things took a turn. Sarah confronted me directly in the break room, looking more frustrated than I had ever seen her. She accused me of going behind her back and told me I was making things worse for everyone, including her kids. I felt my heart racing as I tried to defend myself, explaining that I hadn't meant to cause any harm, and all I wanted was to be treated fairly. She cut me off, saying that I didn't understand what it meant to sacrifice for family because I had no idea what it was like to have kids. It was like a punch to the gut, and I could feel the eyes of other coworkers on us, watching the exchange unfold. I took a deep breath and said, "I may not know what it's like to be a mom, but that doesn't mean my time is any less important. I'm here to support the team, but I'm not your personal babysitter." I thought for a second she might back off after that, but she just stared at me, her eyes narrowing as if she was gauging how to respond. Instead of backing down, she doubled down, accusing me of being selfish and saying I was making her feel like a bad parent. The tension was thick and my heart was racing. I felt cornered, but I stood my ground. I told her, "We all have our struggles and it's not fair to expect me to always pick up your slack just because you have kids." That moment felt pivotal, even if it was incredibly uncomfortable. Sarah stormed off, leaving the break room in a heavy silence. I looked around at my coworkers, and some of them seemed to be processing what had just happened. It was like a ripple effect, and I could see a mix of support and discomfort on their faces. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at work shifted. Some coworkers who had previously avoided me began to speak to me more openly. Jenna was a huge support, and she helped me navigate the fallout. To my surprise, a couple of other coworkers shared similar experiences where they felt pressured to cover for parents at work. It was liberating to connect with them, and we even discussed organizing a casual team lunch to foster better communication and understanding. Then, a few days later, I got called into a meeting with my manager and the HR representative. It was nerve-wracking, but they laid out a plan to address the team dynamics and how we could create a more supportive environment for everyone, regardless of their personal circumstances. It felt like a small victory, knowing I had stood up for myself and that things might finally change for the better. However, Sarah's reaction to the HR discussion was anything but subtle. She started spreading rumors about me, claiming I was trying to get her fired for being a working mother. I couldn't believe the lengths she was going to, but I refused to let it get to me. I remembered why I had taken this stand in the first place and why I wouldn't back down. I continued to focus on my work, and while the tension with Sarah lingered, I felt a sense of empowerment, knowing I wasn't going to let anyone walk all over me anymore. The dynamic in the workplace continued to evolve, and while it wasn't perfect, I was starting to feel like I had a support system in place. I also learned that it's important to advocate for myself and my time, regardless of what others think. Thanks for reading this update. I'll keep you posted as things progress, and I appreciate all the support and encouragement you've shared. It really helped me stand my ground. Update 2. Hey everyone, thanks again for all the support on my last update. Honestly, it felt amazing to share what I was going through, and I really appreciate how many of you reached out with your own stories. I wanted to give you all a quick update on how things have unfolded at work since I last posted. Spoiler alert, things have taken some unexpected turns. After that blow-up with Sarah in the break room, I thought things might cool down a bit, but that wasn't the case. Sarah, it turned out, wasn't one to take a back seat easily. She had clearly been trying to rally support among our coworkers, and it felt like I was suddenly in the middle of a high school drama. I tried to keep my head down and focus on my job, but I could sense the tension in the air every time I walked into the break room or approached the sales floor. In the days that followed, I began to notice more passive-aggressive comments directed my way. Some coworkers who had previously been friendly became more distant, while others made pointed remarks that felt like jabs. One day, as I was stocking shelves, a coworker named Lisa, 29F, made a remark about how some people had too much time on their hands and didn't know what real responsibility looked like. It felt like an obvious dig at me, and I tried to brush it off, but it stung more than I'd like to admit. However, things started to shift when Jenna and I decided to grab lunch together one day. We talked about everything going on, and she encouraged me to keep advocating for myself. During our lunch, Jenna mentioned that Sarah had been making it her mission to convince everyone that I was the problem, and not her constant requests for coverage. It was infuriating, but also a bit funny. I mean, how could anyone think I was the issue in this situation? After that lunch, I began to feel a surge of motivation. I knew I couldn't let Sarah's behavior dictate my experience at work any longer. So, I decided to take a more proactive approach. I started talking to other coworkers during breaks, trying to gauge how they really felt about the situation. It turned out that several of them were also feeling the strain of being asked to cover shifts constantly, even if they didn't have the same personal ties to Sarah as I did. Feeling empowered by this newfound camaraderie, I organized a small gathering after work. I invited a few of the coworkers who I felt comfortable with and who had expressed frustrations about the work dynamics. I thought it would be a good way to discuss how we could support one another without feeling like we were being taken advantage of. The turnout was better than I expected. 7 of us showed up, and we talked for hours about the pressures we felt and how to navigate our work environment more effectively. It was eye-opening to realize that I wasn't alone in this. As we shared stories, we discovered that several coworkers were in similar positions, constantly asked to cover shifts or do extra work because of someone else's obligations. We agreed that we all needed to stand up for our own time and commitments, and that it was okay to say no when it was necessary. That night, we decided to draft a letter outlining our concerns and suggestions for better communication and shift management at work. It was a collaborative effort, and it felt great to be part of something bigger than just my personal struggle. We wanted to propose a more equitable system for shift coverage that took everyone's needs into account. It wasn't just about me, it was about creating a better work environment for all of us. The next week, we presented our letter to our manager. I was nervous, but there was a sense of unity among us that made me feel stronger. Our manager listened intently, and while she didn't promise immediate changes, she seemed receptive to our concerns. She appreciated our willingness to speak up and agreed to look into ways to improve the situation. To my surprise, Sarah's reaction to our collective action was pretty telling. Instead of backing off, she ramped up her efforts to win over our coworkers. I overheard her trying to paint me as the villain even more, claiming that I was trying to destroy her work-life balance. It was honestly laughable, and I was shocked at how far she was willing to go. However, a turning point came when Jenna approached me after her shift one day, looking excited. She told me that she had been talking to some of the newer employees, and they were starting to see through Sarah's manipulations. They appreciated that I had stood up for myself, and a few even mentioned they would back me up if it came down to it. That was a huge relief. It felt like I was finally gaining some ground in this weird battle I had found myself in. Despite the challenges, I began to feel a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt before. I realized that advocating for myself wasn't just about pushing back against Sarah. It was about creating a better environment for everyone at work. My coworkers and I started brainstorming other ways to support each other, whether that meant sharing tips for managing our shifts or simply being there to listen when someone was feeling overwhelmed. Fast forward a few weeks, and things were definitely changing. The atmosphere was still tense, but I could see some of the newer employees growing more comfortable speaking up about their own boundaries. I even had a couple of coworkers approach me to say they appreciated my honesty, which felt amazing. It was clear that Sarah's tactics were beginning to lose their power. One day, our manager called for a team meeting, and I braced myself for the worst. Instead, she surprised us by announcing a new policy regarding shift coverage. She explained that the store would be implementing a more structured approach to shift swapping, ensuring that everyone had a say in how their time was managed. I couldn't believe it. My heart raced as I realized that our collective voices had made an impact. I could see Sarah fuming across the room. Her face flushed as she processed what had just happened. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. For the first time, I felt like my concerns were being validated, and I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. As we wrapped up the meeting, I caught Sarah's eye, and for a moment, I felt a surge of satisfaction. I knew I had stood up for myself, and I had helped pave the way for a better working environment for everyone. It was no longer just about Sarah and her expectations. It was about all of us being respected and valued for our contributions. Thanks again for all your support in this journey. I'll keep you all posted on how things continue to unfold, but I feel hopeful for the first time in a long while. This experience has taught me that it's never too late to stand up for what's right, and sometimes you have to fight for your voice to be heard.